Well, good afternoon, folks, and welcome to our first community briefing for the Communities of Color Nonprofit Stabilization Fund for fiscal year 2025. My name is Francis, and I'm the grants coordinator at the Coalition for Asian American Children and Families, where we're one of the partner organizations for CCNSF. And we're grateful and thankful to be joined with our other partner organizations today. We have Asian American Federation, Hispanic Federation, and New York Urban League. And we're just really grateful to carve out time to share more about CCNSF. We know there's a lot of questions since the application went live. So to kick off, we will briefly introduce ourselves and allow the representatives from our partner organizations to introduce themselves as well. So as mentioned before, my name is Francis, grants coordinator at CACF, and I will pass it to my colleague Kit.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Kit Lau, pronouns she, her. I am with CACF, and I will pass it to Julissa at Hispanic Federation.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julissa. I'm the contracts manager here at the Hispanic Federation. It's a pleasure meeting you all, and I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Anika.
Hi, good afternoon. Almirka Santiago, Vice President for Grants and Capacity Building at Hispanic Federation. I will pass it on to Yvonne.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Yvonne Smothers, Program Coordinator for New York Urban League. Welcome, everyone, and those who are returning, happy to see you again. And I'll pass it on. Who's left?
I'm left. Good
Oh,
afternoon.
Shalima, I'm so sorry.
No problem, no problem. Good afternoon, all. My name is Shalima McCant, and I'm the Chief Program Officer here at the New York Urban League. And it's great to see our newcomers as well as our returners.
I can go next. My name is Daphne Tomasula. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Associate Director of Programs at the Asian American Federation with the Technical Assistance Partner of this initiative. And I'll pass to my colleague, Mia.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I'm Mia, she, her pronouns, and I am the Program Coordinator of Nonprofit Support at Asian American Federation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eduardo Lebron, and I'm the Associate Director of Development at Society of the Educational Arts.
Thank you, Eduardo. Actually, this was just more for the partners, the CCNSF partners, to introduce themselves. Sorry about that. We can go to the next slide, please.
Great. Thanks, y'all. So I appreciate y'all putting your name, your org, and position in the chat. Please feel free to do that as we continue. We just want to get a sense of who's in the room and like where you're coming from. So we're going to launch a couple of polls just so we can see. So I'm going to launch our first poll. And the question is, what borough is your org located in? So I'll give folks like 10 seconds to answer. So I see we have a lot of Manhattan folks here today. I love seeing Staten Island. I feel like that's an org that, or an area that we don't get as many applications from. Awesome. So I'm gonna share these results. So yeah, so Manhattan we have the most representation from, but it looks like we have representation from all 5 boroughs, which we love to see. And I'll launch one more poll just because we want to see too who is a first-time applicant, just so we're aware. So I'll give folks about 10 seconds to answer this one. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. So we have a pretty good mix. Most are first time, or a little less than half are first time applicants, which is good to know. So thank y'all for doing those polls. whether you're a returning applicant or first-time applicant from whichever borough you're coming from, just welcome to today's first community briefing. This is our 11th year of this program. We're very excited to be able to offer this again. There's always a lot of advocacy that happens on the back end to make sure that this program continues. So we want to give a really big thank you to all the organizations, all the elected officials who really help us continue to get this funding. We ask that you also advocate and you contact your elected officials, let them know about this program and how it's helpful, just so that we can continue doing this and sustaining this funding for years to come. So the Communities of Color Nonprofit Stabilization Fund was established in 2014 to provide capacity building grants and to build up organizational infrastructure, which we know is necessary for any nonprofit, but we also know that this type of work is often not funded. So this year, the City Council has allocated $3.7 million to this fund. With this funding, we're building up your infrastructure so you can plan for long-term sustainability. We provide tools for you to sustain and grow your organization. We offer technical assistance opportunities too. And we also provide spaces for networking where you can network with other orgs. You can learn from each other, share resources, discuss best practices too. You can go to the next slide. So to begin, we are going to review eligibility. So there are certain things you need to think about. The first is you need to be registered with the city. If you already have other city contracts, you just need to make sure that you're up to date in passport. You also need to make sure you are registered with the State's Charities Bureau and that you've been a 501c3 for at least 2 years. I think this is really important. I think in the past, we've had groups who have come to these briefings who are not yet at that 2-year mark, but they were able to apply for funding later after they reached that 2-year mark. So this initiative is funded by City Council, so you have to be New York City based. And 75% of the people you serve also need to be in New York City. You need to be a direct services organization as well. Serve communities with more than 51% or more people of color. And you also need to make sure you're doing targeted outreach to those communities too. In terms of the budget, last year we got approval to increase the upper range. So to qualify, you need to have an org budget between $150,000 to $3.5 million. Last year, we were able to get it increased because we know that investment in small and mid-sized organizations is really important. And it's necessary to continue to serve communities that are really still dealing with, even now, the aftermath of the pandemic. So we wanted to allow a greater number of orgs to build their capacity to continue to provide essential services. In terms of what budget to use, we ask that you look at your most recently filed Form 990, because that's the budget that we'll use to determine eligibility. But if you have specific questions about that, you can always email the administrating partner that you're applying to. We also want to make sure that you are committed to equal employment opportunities and that you're committed and you also have the capacity to provide culturally competent services. And an important note, a lot of groups do a lot of good work and use fiscal sponsors, but for this funding, you actually would, if you use a fiscal sponsor, you actually wouldn't be eligible. So in the past, we've had some groups who have tried to move on from fiscal sponsors to bring like financial operations in-house that were later eligible to qualify for funding. You can go to the next slide. Did we skip the project slide? Oh, thank you. So we'll review the different types of capacity building projects. So there are different project areas you can apply for. The first being management information systems, design and development, financial management and planning, evaluation and outcome system development, leadership development, new program planning and development, strategy and organizational development, and collaboration and strategic alliances. So some examples from the past of projects include like setting up financial systems. Some orgs have done succession planning before too. If you're looking for more ideas or more specific examples of projects, those are listed on our website, so you can refer to the website for that, or again, reach out to any of the partners with questions that you have. We really want to emphasize that this funding opportunity is specifically for capacity building projects, so nothing to do with program implementation. And we also really want to emphasize that if you've applied in the past, you can't apply for the same project that you applied for in any other year. And then 2 other things to keep in mind. If your org budget is between 150,000 and 500,000, you can request up to $35,000. And if your org budget is between 500,000 and $1, be 3.5 million, then you could request up to $45,000. You can go to the next slide.
So all applications have moved online. They are posted on our website under the apply button in our homepage. From there, you will apply to the partner based on the largest percentage of community members you serve. So if you're serving the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, you will apply under CACF. If you're serving the Hispanic community, you will apply under Hispanic Federation. If you're serving the Black community, you will apply under the New York Urban League. It's very important to know that you can only submit one application. So if you submit multiple applications, it will disqualify your organization for this upcoming cycle. Next slide, please.
Yvonne, I think this is you.
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, so our city council vetting process. Make sure you go online and check the status of your organization, because city council will check the status of your organization. They use Lexis comprehensive business report searches such as principals, tax liens, warrants, workers' compensation violation. Make sure your address is correct. So anything, look up your organization and make sure there's no negative news about your organization. Otherwise, you will be disqualified. They are going to search the IRS database, looking at your tax exempt status, the New York State Department of State Corporations database, New York State's tax warrant notice database, the New York Department of Buildings, location, occupancy status, New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, child group care services, and daycare center inspections. Make sure you have all your paperwork up to date. Review of use of funds is to ensure that monies are not used in a prohibited manner. Some people, they are not honest, so they use these grants for other circumstances. So please make sure you're on point. Conflicts of interest form, charities exemption, if applicable, and authorization reviews. Next slide.
City Council will do a deep dive vetting process for your consultants. They'll check if there's any red flags or negative news regarding your consultants. Here is some sites and sources that City Council will be looking into. They'll be looking into the Lexis Comprehensive Business Report search to see if there's any related entities, principals, tax warrants, liens, workers' compensation violations, and addresses. City Council will also be looking at the Lexis News article search to see if there is any negative news regarding your consultant, and also the registration with State Attorney General's office, as well as Google and social media and conflict of interest forms. I'll pass it to Julissa to talk more about budget.
Yeah, thank you, Kit. So let's talk about budgets. So budgets are essentially a roadmap for your spending. When completing the application, it is required for you to include a budget within your proposal. With that being said, when applying, just think about some important factors that could affect your decision when requesting a full award amount, such as what are your goals and deliverables, what deliverables you will be providing, and what is the time frame of this project. So there are 4 budget categories that you'll be allocating expenses to. This includes salaries and wages, fringe benefits, consultants, and OTPS. For salary, it is capped at 30% of your project award amount. This amount is allocated to staff members who are either delivering a training, professional development, or any type of technical assistance, or for assisting staff members who are interested in participating in a training or professional development. Fringe benefits such as health insurance is capped 15% of that salary line. Consultants are capped at 60% of the budget. We believe that consultants are such a great asset just to build up the development of your project goals. But just a gentle reminder, there's a max amount of 3 consultants that you could use for this project. And also computer and hardware are capped at 30%. And again, no capital or administrative overhead expenses are allowed. So next slide, please. So this is a sample budget utilizing a 35,000 award amount. You could see how fringe is at 15%. So that makes up 10,500. Consultants are maxed out at 21,000. And the remainder is just used for OTPS, which makes up the whole 35K. So next slide, please. Here is a more detailed description of our sample budget, which is also included in our website. I do, however, want to go into more detail of what could exactly be applied for under consultants and OTPS. So for a consultant, you're choosing someone with a specific skill set that could serve an asset for your project in a limited time. So a consultant cannot be an existing staff member or someone on your payroll. I really want to highlight that it's important to find a consultant that is best suited for the project needs for this term, as you're going to just develop a close relationship throughout the project term. And as mentioned, each consultant is vetted by a city agency. For OTPS, those are expensive that salary and fringe cannot cover, such as fee coverage for a workshop that a staff member wants to attend, any supplies that are utilized in staff trainings that they're leading, and also any hardware such as computers, financial software, and monitors are again capped at 30%. Next slide, please. So here again is the same budget template. And this template is provided on our website. And this is what you would use to submit your budget along with your application. This template is an itemized breakdown of expenses. It is important to be really descriptive in each line item and make sure that you're allocating, what you're allocating falls within the realms of what is approved. And yeah, that is the sample budget that's also available on our website. Next slide, please.
For future reference, as you're looking for your consultants, please keep this in mind. Consultants cannot be existing staff of your organization or current or former interns or related to any staff or board members. Consultants cannot have an email address issued by your organization. Consultants should be properly interviewed and have references checked. The budget allocation for total consultant expense is capped at 60% of your total award amount. And your consultant can be for-profit or nonprofit, but do keep in mind that the total consultant expenses is maxed out at 60% of your award amount. And last but not least, all your proposed consultants needs to submit current documentation, and they will be vetted as we had explained for the current year. Please also keep in mind as you're completing the CCNSF application that the application will be asking you for the following information for your consultants. You will need to submit your consultant's resume, the contact information, and a description of why you are choosing the specific consultant for your capacity building project, the rationale for choosing the consultant. There's also a client list that you may need to provide to us, which is a list of past clients that your consultants have worked with, past or present. So please keep this in mind as you are filling out the CCNSF application. I'll pass this to Julissa to talk more about tips for engaging with consultants.
Thank you, Kit. I do want to share some tips to engage with a consultant. I think what we really strive for each organization is just to have a successful outcome for their project and not to only consider a consultant as an asset, but a collaborator. So here are some tips. Number one, have clear expectations for all project requirements, their role and deliverables. So when you're thinking of interviewing candidates for the role, make sure their previous and relevant expertise is really aligned to what you're seeking and defining your organization's project goals. Also ensure all documents are ready for submission. City council vetting could take time, so we want to make sure there are no initial bumps. I think a really good rule of thumb is just to have a backup consultant in mind, just in case your initial consultant does not pass the vetting process. And then lastly, just maintain a line of communication between you and your consultant. You can just do this by scheduling check-ins. I really encourage you to, again, just to see them as a collaborator, because it's really assumed that they're an expert in the area that they're helping you in. Next slide, please.
So looking at our timeline, after this briefing, we will offer 2 additional briefings, the second being on October 31st at 11 a.m. and the third being November 7th at 11 a.m. And recordings will be available for each. The most important date we want folks to keep in mind, and we will continue to remind and stress highly, is the application due date, which is November 12th at 5 p.m. Applications received after the deadline, unfortunately, will not be accepted. So what happens from there is that there's an allocation panel, which are volunteers who have professional backgrounds in either philanthropy or nonprofit. They will review and evaluate the applications. And then from there, they will hold a convening where they will decide who will be awarded, but also who to consider as alternates. We hope by then to make an announcement to folks with decision status at the start of the new year. But again, please continue to reach out to us if you have questions in the interim. How it looks for the rest of the timeline is that once we have we've gotten in touch with our awardees and they've accepted the award, we will be reaching out to them in terms of orientation, logistics, check-ins, and reports. Given that this is a 6-month grant period that CCNSF concludes in terms of projects and budget spending by June 30th, 2025, and no extensions will be provided. Lastly, we're still in the midst of planning and deciding what capacity building trainings we'd like to offer. We will continue to update folks. And just a note that the capacity building trainings, they are open to everyone, both awardees and applicants. Next slide, please. And as mentioned throughout the briefing, the CCNSF website is constantly updated. This is where you can continue to refer and get additional information as you're working on your application. As mentioned earlier, we also have the updated consultant list available. This is the list that awardees have, these are the consultants that awardees have used in the past. And also there's a budget sample available as you're working and navigating through the application process. And lastly, the recordings from this briefing and for the additional 2 briefings, they will also be available and posted on the website. Next slide, please. And I'll pass.
Hello, can you hear me? So for contact information, make sure you only submit your applications to one organization, and the following organizations: Asian American Federation, Coalition for Asian American Children and Families, Hispanic Federation, and New York Urban League. And each person's Each partner's phone number as well as their email are listed. So please do not forget, you can only submit one application. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Shalima McCants for questions.
All righty, good afternoon. Thank you all so much for that detailed presentation, and hopefully it did address some of the questions you have. We do have a few in the chat. A lot of them pertain to the consultants. So I just want to go over some of the questions with you all and ask our representatives to get ready to respond. So first, one question asks, what is the purpose of this fund? Is it for consultants or is it for the organization? My understanding was that it was for the organization, but again, I'll give you time to expand on that as well. I'm gonna go with you, Francis, if you want to respond, please.
Unmute.
Thank you, Shalima. I'm sorry. Could you repeat the first two questions again?
No problem. The question was, what is the purpose? I'm assuming this person is a first-time applicant. So they just want to understand what's the purpose of the grant. Is it for the organization or the consultant?
Sure. Thank you, Shalima. So the purpose of CCNSF, this is specifically for to fund capacity building projects. This is not to do with programming. This is strictly capacity building projects, and one that can help bolster and strengthen the organization's infrastructure. The funding is meant to be directly for the organization. Of course, as you've heard throughout the presentation, the project budget and how you allocate your awarded amount, there are caps for each of those areas, including for the consultant. I hope that helps a bit. If not, please feel free to drop additional questions in the chat.
Thank you so much. And then again, we talked about the consultants. Is there a list of consultants vetted by City Council? I believe I heard you say there was, and it was on the website, but just want to confirm to make sure I'm answering the right information.
Okay, so there is a list that will be posted or is posted on the website. However, we don't suggest any of the consultants. You have to find your consultant. You may use someone on the list. However, each and every consultant, whether on the list or not, they must be vetted by City Council in the present time. So if you choose one of the consultants, they have to be vetted by City Council as well.
Hi,
Okay.
I just wanted to chime in on that.
Okay.
I'm Mirka from Hispanic Federation. So yes, as Yvonne said, every year the consultants are vetted and we do not endorse any. It is simply a list of consultants that have worked with us under this initiative in the past. So just very clear there, there's no endorsing. And yes, they must be vetted every single year. So every single year, even if they've been used in the past, you need to submit the requested documentation. If the documentation is not in, we cannot vet them, we cannot approve them, you cannot work with them. And then the other part that I wanted to chime in on is the use of consultants, right? This is a capacity building initiative in the sense that the assumption is that you don't have internally the expertise needed to, let's say, improve your financial management systems, right? So because of this, the initiative was created to allow you these dollars to hire the external expertise to come in and strategize with you, to help you do organizational assessments for, whatever the infrastructural need is, which is why we have it so that it is at least capped at 60 because, there is also, consultants can be super expensive. So we have it capped at 60 so that you can focus on one area of need in your organization and work on that project within the very limited time that this initiative is offered as well. And there are other caps because, for technology, right? Technology should not take over the entire budget. Technology easily can do that. So there's a cap on technology. There's a cap on the salary just to make sure that you give it the budget room for other types of expenses that can come up when capacity building is needed. So there was just a whole calculation behind the caps that were implemented for each of the categories for this budget. But it is for the organization to manage. But yeah, it is heavy on the consultant side just because it is to bring in that external expertise for whatever your infrastructural needs are at the moment.
In that case, I have a question. In that case, if that's right, then the consultant has to pay the 40% and organization has to pay the 60%. So allocation ratio has to be the other way around if it is for organization. What do you think about that? The budget allocation already indicates this is for consultant, not for organization. Organization working for the consultant, actually, not the consultant working for organization.
Well, no, but the consultant is taking on a major project for the organization, right? Let's say you need a CRM.
So
if you don't have one,
in that case, then consultant has to apply for this, and then they have to choose an organization. That's the logical process, right? Consultant can choose an organization, and they can apply for this grant, and then they can get money, 60%, and the 40% they can spend for the organization.
I understand your concern. You can feel free to reach out to the agency that will be assisting you throughout the process if you want to have
Can you share the agency in the chat so that I can reach out them? Can you share on the chat? Spell it out at the city. I can reach out to the city.
I think it comes down to just understanding where your organization is and which one you fall under. So as they stated earlier in the presentation, there's a number of organizations you can apply to. So it really comes down to that part. But we can sort of follow with you directly just to make sure we understand your request. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for the question. Another question we have, Ms. Santiago, and I'm going to stay with you for a minute. Can you clarify what are the required documents for the consultant? I'm not sure if I saw that in the presentation, but let me know if that was discussed.
It's in the RFA.
Okay.
It's all in the RFA. So yeah, any documentation that's needed for any of the elements, organizational, right? If your application is not complete, we also can't consider it. So we need your organizational documents to all be in, but also the consultant. And then, it's having a justification for them, their resume, right? So that we see that there's expertise based off of what you're claiming they're going to do for you. And it's again a process where you should be vetting the consultant first. So if they tell you my expertise is creating marketing development plans, then you should be able to see that in their resume as well, right? We're just going to be another layer of the vetting process. And then the final layer really is going to be the city to make sure that the proposed consultants don't have any red flags in their background and dealings with, any government entities or, whatever it is that they do.
And thank you for that. And just to confirm, one of the questions in the chat was, is a consultant required? And from what I heard you explain was that technically you're bringing in this outside party to be able to support the capacity of your organization, which is why you're applying for this grant. Right. So just want to make sure I'm clear on that information and that we can just sort of repeat that for the group as well.
Yes. Exactly what you said, Shalima. It's very difficult for these initiatives to go through without a consultant, and it doesn't have to be a consultant that's taking 60%, by the way. That is a cap. That is a cap that we impose, city, really, as well. But it's been imposed just to make sure that the requests are reasonable, right? Whatever they're proposing to you is reasonable. But it doesn't require that 60% go out to a consultant. You can give a consultant 40%, but you also just have to show us what the rest of your budget looks like. And again, everything has to match what you're proposing.
Actually, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. I'm sorry for that. And last year, a consultant came to me, the budget is 60% capped. So why don't you give me 60%? That was the conflict. And actually, I didn't choose her at the end because of that weird conversation. She was saying it's a 60% capped. So 60% is my share.
Well, so just
I proposed 50% to be fair, 50-50. But then the consultant was not satisfied with that.
So then you may not want to choose that consultant if that person.
Yeah, I didn't go there. Yeah.
Yeah, because like Ms. Santiago stated, it is the cap. So for example, if you decide that this consultant is getting 30, 40, you have the right to do that. And if that consultant doesn't want that fee, then by all means, you don't have to choose that consultant. It can look for someone else that can be in compliance with what you're requesting.
Yes, so I want to improve the program itself. So laying out, certain aspect that, I'm the person who is really lived experiencing all this process, right? I'm choosing the consultant and I'm getting the, I'm allocating the budget, but then consultant knows all these things too. So they claim that 60% is my share. That's a strong argument. And that's right. Because you guys are laying out 60% cap.
Hey, can
It's
I
a cap.
jump in? Sorry,
Yes,
my name
please.
is Hi, my name is Ambrosia. I work for the Coalition for Asian American Children and Families. Hengil, you will be applying under us. So is it possible let's talk offline just so we can get through a couple of questions from other folks, but we'll reach out to you directly and talk more.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you
I'm
so
just
much.
clarifying the situation, point by point, immediately.
No problem. Thank you so much for the question.
Can
We
I mention
appreciate it.
something
Oh,
to
yes.
Lima? This is also part of kind of like tips when working with consultants, and we too are nonprofits. We too have budgets that we're managing. It doesn't hurt to get bids, right? If you need to speak to 3 consultants and see who presents the best offer, who seems to understand your organization most, right? Who seems to try to get at what the purpose of your project is, there's nothing wrong with that. So feel free to definitely shop around. The list is extensive. You can call half of that list if you have to. But that's also another tip that you can take along with working with consultants. There's nothing wrong with getting bids to see who would work best with you within the budget means and also with the project.
Thank you. I did see that there was a question in the chat regarding where a consultant can live, and that was answered. So thank you so much for addressing that, Francis. Another question was, please explain the 60-40 distribution. I think we had a lot of conversation about it, so it may have got a little confusing. But if someone could explain the 60-40 distribution, that'll definitely be helpful.
Well, the fact is, when you have your budget, 100%, 60% is the cap that you can give to your consultant. But as Amirko stated to you, you don't have to use the total 60% for a consultant. You can use the consultant capped up to 60%, or you can use a consultant at 40%, but the rest of your budget has to equal out to the 100% of 35K or 45K. So if you have a consultant and your budget is $45,000, the cap is 60% of that budget, which will mean that you can only pay your consultant up to $27,000 of that budget. The rest is allocated for salaries, OTPS, and etc. But if you have a budget at $35,000, $21,000 is the cap you can use for a consultant. Now, if you choose not to use the 21,000, you can use 15,000, 20,000. So that's the way the budget operates, and I hope you can understand that.
Thank you so much for that. And then I see, thank you for answering the question regarding how many consultants are necessary. Again, they say the max is up to 3, but you can use 1. It just depends on what your need is one question. And then I see, does the 60% for the consultant include travel costs for consultant coming in from outside of New York City? So I'm assuming this consultant is not in the city and they want to be able to understand what expenses can be allocated for the consultant. One was noted with regard to travel. So is that an expense that can be allocated under the consultant?
I think that has to do with you and your consultant agreement. They're there for the service to service your organization. That's between you and your consultant. All we require is the invoice, the amount of hours, whatever, but that's between the contract between you and your consultant, what terms you're using.
Thank you. And just to clarify, I see that there's a discrepancy regarding the online application date. So I believe on the slide, if you want to go back one slide, it was noted that the application is due on the 12th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So yes, we
absolutely.
apologize about that. We'll definitely make sure the date is updated. So please note for your records, it is due on the 12th, and we will definitely update the documents to make sure everything says the 12th. So don't send us a screenshot of the 17th. We're gonna update it to the 12th. We're gonna update it.
I think the
perfect.
17th was last year.
Yeah, the
That
17th
was
was last
last
year.
year.
Yes. Yeah, so
Right.
it has been updated. So thank
It's
you
been
so much for
updated.
promptly updating the date. So everyone knows it's due on the 12th. Thank you so much for that. Again, I believe I caught all questions. Oh no, I didn't. It was one of my notes. Hold on a minute. There was one question regarding under eligibility. How do you define direct service organization? Is there a specific terminology that we're using for direct service organization? I believe it was earlier on in the slides, if we want to go back to that. And if I've misrepresented your question, please feel free to come off mute and ask directly. But what I have written is under eligibility, how do you define direct service organization? Again, when I hear direct service, I'm thinking an organization that's providing directly to the community, like they're directly interacting with the community. But again, if it's more to that, definitely feel free to chime in. Okay. Yes, okay. Direct service organization serving 75% of New York City residents. So we do want you to be an organization in New York City, primarily supporting 75% of your participants, clients, students, etc., will be New York City residents as well. Just note that in that regards. And yes, the meeting is being recorded, and information will be shared out with you after the presentation. I see we have a question. I don't want to mispronounce your name, but you have your hand raised. So I believe it's you. Yes. Yep. You just came off mute.
Sorry, I was having difficulty typing into the chat, so I just wanted to confirm, did you say the consultant portion was necessary to have? Or was that an option?
If anyone wants to confirm, I understood it was necessary because you're bringing in an outside provider to provide a direct service that you and your team cannot provide internally, but definitely feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I would say it's been rare in the past 10 years. I think no more than one or two have gone through. And I think it was because there was a chunk of money that went to marketing materials. Because that was the focus of the initiative. So again, it depends on the initiative. Majority is going to require external expertise, right? Maybe it wasn't consulted because it was mostly a printing company, right? Due to the marketing focus of the initiative. But I'd say a good 90+% has been with consultants. The ones that are without, few and far in between, and can't even think of it off the top of my head because they've been so few. But I do remember one of them had a heavy like marketing element, and it was a lot of material producing.
Thank you for that. The last question I see here is, what's the time frame for recruitment of ED and CEO? Again, I want to make sure I understand the full question, but what is the time frame for recruitment of the ED and CEO? Can you want to explain that one, Lynette? If I said your name right, I apologize. Or incorrect, I mean. Because I don't believe you're recruiting a CEO or ED here. But yeah, go ahead and explain the question.
Yes, I'm sorry. Good afternoon, everybody. So one of the criteria for eligibility is recruitment of an ED CEO. And my question is, so I represent St. Matthew's Baptist Church, which is in Harlem, New York. So my question is, in terms of recruitment, is there a specific time frame? So for example, we had our pastor or our former pastor retire. So we went through the process of selecting a new pastor. That was some years ago. So since then, we haven't had the necessity to recruit for an executive director or a board of directors. So in terms of the eligibility requirement for that specific criteria, I needed to know what the time frame was.
It's not criteria for the initiative, right? So you don't have to recruit. Ideally, you would have someone in that position in the organization to go for capacity building toward a project, because it's very important to have your leaders involved in this sort of project. It is infrastructural, you know. So you need to have your ED or CEO or president. In the absence of, then the proposal has to match this gap that you have, right? Like maybe you're focusing on succession planning because you don't have it. In that case, it can make sense, but to not have one going into this could be problematic, right? Because it's like, well, where's the buy-in? Who's really going to see this through? But it's not a requirement to recruit to apply. What we look for when we talk about eligibility is that, you know, we are, again, this is a communities of color initiative. So it's about showing that you are intentional in recruiting from communities of color for your leadership. So that is really what the question addresses for eligibility, showing that you do consider the communities of color that you serve also in your hiring practices, but not that you have to hire in this process for this initiative.
No, excuse me. So I guess you misunderstood my question. So if you go back to the slide that showed eligibility, it stated in there that one of the criteria for eligibility, and thank you for going back. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, demonstrated record of outreach to communities of color for recruitment of executive director, CEO, and board of directors. So my question was, yes, we have done a recruitment, but it was in the past. So I was asking in terms of being eligible to apply for the grant, is there a prescribed time frame under which we may potentially be eliminated because we haven't done that outreach in the last year, the last 2 years? So that was my question.
So the answer to address this particular bullet is it's going to be in the demonstration of who your leadership is, right? So when you give us your board of directors list, and when we see who the executive director or CEO is, there's going to be a look of like, you know, is this leadership community that they're serving? And it doesn't have to be that so it's more in the outcomes, right? So if in the outcome, it shows that you have a very diverse board of directors and or executive director and CEO, then that shows that you demonstrated intentional outreach in communities of color when recruiting for your leadership positions. Does that make sense?
Thank you so much. That definitely answers the question.
Thank you so much. One of the questions I saw was, can a consultant be outside of the US? I believe that's what I wanted. Yes, the question was, can a consultant be outsourced from outside of the US? They have a consultant who is in Asia they're thinking about, so wanted to know, could they consider someone outside of the US for their consultant?
That's a tough one because, again, they're going to be going through DYCD, New York City vetting, legal, and all of that. And if, you know, for some reason they have an issue or red flags, I just don't know if they will pass the vetting process. Because, again, the city to these entities, the organizations, that's why you're all vetted. The individuals receiving money, that's why the consultants are all vetted. So that's actually a city issue and question that we wouldn't really know how to answer. If you propose it, you just need to have a backup in case they're not approved.
I was going to say that. I was going to have the backup ready just in case. Alrighty, well, those seem to be all the questions that were asked in the chat that wasn't addressed verbally and or in the chat directly. If we missed anyone, feel free to come off mute and ask your question. We want to make sure we address your questions before we log off. Do you see any, am I missing any hands or any lights or anything like that?
Can you explain? Can you explain a little bit further about the consultant? Wait, you can use a consultant that you're already working as long as they're not directly affiliated with the organization. Can you explain
Hi, I
that?
can explain that real quickly.
Thank you.
So basically, as in one of the past slides in the briefing, so in terms of when you're deciding which consultant you'd like to bring on, it's important to keep certain parameters in mind. And one of those parameters is making sure that the consultant does not have a direct relationship with the organization, meaning that they don't have an email address with your organization's name on it. They're not directly related to you, whether they'd be a former staff member, intern, board member, just addressing those specific parameters to keep in mind. If you've worked with this consultant before, and as long as they're not affiliated with your organization, you can definitely add them to your list of consultants. Just keep in mind that they will still need to be vetted and cleared as part of the protocol. But yes, that is that's just, again, just to reiterate, again, keeping certain parameters in mind when you're bringing consultants on board. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? One question in the chat is, can a freelance webmaster be a consultant? So I understand a consultant can be anyone that's identified as a consultant, up to you based on their qualifications, based on their expertise, based on their needs. But again, if someone wants to expand a little bit more on the consultant piece, do advise.
Yeah, I would say that yes, they qualify as a consultant, and I think that one thing, and Julisa's definitely experienced it this year, so she'll be watching out for that detail, is if you have contractors, right, that you consider them a contractor, it's the same thing. Someone that is not on your payroll is going to be considered a consultant, because if you're not paying FICA for them, you're not considering them a part-time employee or a full-time employee, they are your contractors, your consultants, they're going to be in the consultant category. So I know that some organizations, you're small and maybe half of your staff is actually contractors, but those would be individuals that, well, they can't be under this initiative, right? Consultants, because they'll probably have email addresses for the organization, but those people are also considered consultants because you don't pay, they're not part of your payroll. But also feel free if you have specific situations, circumstances that you want to kind of like run by us, give us a call, just so that the process is easy as to once we receive the full application. We've already talked about it. We've already ironed out all the kinks, and you're good to go once you submit. So feel free to reach out to us before.
Thank you so much for that. So if there are no additional questions, I want to turn it back over to my colleagues who will provide closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Shalima. Thank you very much to everyone who attended our briefing. We're grateful for your presence. We're grateful for your engagement, and more importantly, grateful for the questions that you've asked all throughout. Again, we will host a second briefing on October 31st at 11 a.m. and then a third one on November 7th at 11 a.m. You are more than welcome to attend, and please feel free to share within your networks. We will have this recording. We will send it to folks once it's available along with the slide deck. So thank you to those in advance who have asked that question. Again, we will stay on for a few more minutes if folks have additional questions, but in the interim, we can